What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel. We have a major announcement by the UFC, by Dana White in particular. And this is a great announcement. It's the Qatar card. Qatar is a great city, by the way, if you guys haven't been there, or country, excuse me. But we've got a big announcement, okay, for UFC Qatar. And the announcement is that Arman Tsarukyan will be headlining against Dan Hooker. Now, there's been a lot of rumors that Arman Tsarukyan was being placed against Dan Hooker. And I think this is a great matchup. I think Dan Hooker's talked a lot of smack already about Arman. He calls him like a spoiled kid. And so there's a little bit of heat there. I think it's going to be a fun fight. Who doesn't love to watch Dan Hooker fight? I'm very curious to see how this fight goes. I have to imagine Arman is going to be the favorite here. And maybe he's got the age advantage. He's got probably the more well-rounded skill set. I would imagine. I'm sure Dan Hooker obviously has the advantage in pure striking, but it's going to be a mixed martial arts fight. I think Arman Tsarukyan is going to be favored. He's had a massive hiatus. You know, it's crazy. He hasn't had a fight in, I don't know, like a year and a half or something. He was scheduled to fight in January, and he had to pull out of that fight because of a weight issue. You know, some people say it's an injury, but we've gone into detail on this channel about how Justin firmly believes that it was just a failed weight cut. Dana White even echoed those sentiments recently and said, yeah, he missed because he pulled out of the fight because he missed weight. So whatever you decide, whatever you think actually happened, it is what it is. But finally, he's back now. This said in this article that Arman Tsarukyan is back in the good graces. Where does it say that? Yeah, it says somewhere he's freed from UFC purgatory after derailing the UFC 311 main event. This is not being free from purgatory. If he was matched up against Ilia Topuria, this is being free from purgatory. Dana White said at that event that Arman Tsarukyan needs to have fights to make his way back to the title. So everything is unfolding as it's supposed to unfold. Remember, Arman Tsarukyan was previously offered Gamrot, and he refused the Gamrot fight. I think that's why he had to sit for a little bit longer until they could find the right opponent. They landed on Dan Hooker. So now exactly what Dana White said was going to happen is going to happen. I know a lot of people are upset that it's not Ilia versus Arman, and I understand that because it's a phenomenal fight. But to me, for the UFC to make a correct business decision, they can't just throw him back in the mix when he derailed such a massive event at the 11th hour. That is something that needs to be massively discouraged. And for them to throw him right back into a title shot, I think is sending a wrong message and establishing a poor pattern of a poor conduct of business, because it's going to show the fighters, hey, you can do something similar and get away with it. Nah, I think they had to put their foot down. So I understand, even though I'd love to see Arman versus Ilia, Arman versus Islam, whatever, I'd love to see all of that. I think this makes sense. Plus, who doesn't love Arman versus Dan Hooker? This is a great fight. Now let's look at the rest of the card. As we are, by the way, yeah, see, Dan Hooker's 35. I think Arman's 28, something like that. So he's super young. Now let's look at the rest of the fight. This is crazy. What a little banger of a fight here that snuck onto the card. Belal Muhammad versus Ian Garry. That's a huge fight for Ian Garry. If he can beat the former champ, that's going to shoot him right into title contention. And you got to give Ian Garry a lot of props. He's always game for any fight, any competitor that they throw his way. Remember, not too long ago, he took on Carlos Prates, who a lot of people were wondering, why is he taking that fight? Why is he jumping down the rankings? But Ian Garry is game. So he's taking on Belal Muhammad. I have to believe if he beats Belal Muhammad, that he's going to get right back or he's going to get that title shot. He's probably going to jump over anybody else who could potentially be there, and he's going to face who I believe will be the winner of the 170 matchup, which will be Islam Makhachev. Imagine Ian Garry versus Islam. Welterweight is very exciting. This entire card's pretty cool. We've got some great names. We see Alexandre Topuria, obviously Ilia Topuria's brother, who's going to be on here as well. I'm not sure what the date is here for this UFC Qatar fight. November 22nd. Yo, the UFC is on fire right now. I can't wait for this. But there's a much bigger issue, much bigger question here at play with this announcement. And the bigger question is what's going to go down with the UFC title fight in terms of the lightweight division. And this is a very important point, because the UFC and Dana White have used this playbook before. What's that playbook? Well, there may be a number one fighter, a number two fighter, whatever, a contender that the people and the audience and the crowd feels is the rightful contender. But maybe the UFC doesn't want that matchup because there's a better matchup. There's a more intriguing matchup. Plus, they want to give better odds to the sitting champion because he's such a star. So they want to keep that boat afloat, as opposed to throwing in a contender that could likely win but doesn't have nearly as big of a following or nearly as big of star potential, right? That's what we have right now, in my opinion, in the UFC. And I like Arman Tsarukyan. I've said this many times. I think he's great in interviews. I think he's kind of like cold-blooded. He had that crazy beef with Bobby Green. He didn't back down. Like Arman attacked somebody in the crowd once during the walkout. Like he's not somebody to be trifled with. I like Arman Tsarukyan. And when I call out the weight miss, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not saying I hate Arman Tsarukyan. I just believe that's what happened. That's just the reality of the situation, as said by Dana White and as corroborated by Justin, which is with his great factual analysis. So I love Arman Tsarukyan as a fighter, but I think we understand that Ilia has major star power, and there's another fighter in the division that has amazing star power, but potential, I think, to even surpass Ilia Topuria, and that's Paddy the Baddy. Now, I know we still have Justin Gaethje waiting in the wings, and I think it could be a play that they could still get Justin Gaethje in the mix to fight Ilia Topuria. I just don't know, though, because I said this after 317 because I was there in Vegas. I saw it live. I saw the knockout, and I was like, and Paddy goes into the cage, and I'm like, I get people being upset if they slide Paddy in next, but at the same time, this is a Habib versus Conor level of magnitude fight that we have on our hands that comes by once, maybe a decade, very rarely, where there's real beef. Both guys are big stars, and let's face them off and let's just make the whole crowd go wild. So I said, man, maybe they should just make it. They should just make it. Because even if people get a little upset, at the end of the day, eventually when the fight is made, people go bananas. The pressure will be incredible. Paddy will deliver. All of Liverpool and the UK was going to be so behind Paddy. It's going to be amazing. But you gotta have some justification. So by them making this fight already, and I know it sounds silly. It's like, well, yeah, they made the fight. They didn't have to make this fight. So obviously, this doesn't make any sense as a strategy, but they ran this play before and they kind of passed it along and people kind of bought it. So I think they're running the same play, even though it's a little ridiculous. What they're doing is they're booking that fight. So then when people come back and then let's say they announce Ilia versus Paddy in a month from now, they'll be like, well, what are you talking about? Arman just had a fight. He just fought. Yeah, but you made that fight with that when Ilia didn't have a fight. Why didn't you schedule the fight? I don't remember how it went down, but he was already booked. He just fought. He can't fight. He can't turn around and fight Ilia this quickly. Paddy's available. He wanted the fight. Boom, we made it happen. And just to show you that this has happened before, they ran the same exact play last year when they had Alex. It's almost the exact same situation. They had Alex Pereira versus Khalil Roundtree, who was like number 8 at the time. I think Paddy's 8 or 9 or 7 or something. Almost identical. And this is exactly what he said in response to Kevin Iole when he brought it up. Hey, why didn't you get, and Big Ankh was the guy. He was number 2 at the time. Okay. But remember, Big Ankh, they scheduled him to fight Rakic. And then right after that, they announced that Alex Pereira versus Khalil Roundtree. So listen to Kevin Iole grilling Dana White here and see how he responds. And you can see, I guarantee you, this is exactly what they got in mind. They're going to make this fight. And then when people question them, why didn't you put Arman in there? They're going to have some sort of an answer like this. Check this out.
Let's go to the rankings. He was ranked number 8, and you made a fight a week or two before that for number 2, Magomed Ankalaev. Why did you make an Ankalaev fight when he was number 2, when you knew Alex was going to be in the mix here very shortly?
I don't remember exactly what the timing of that was, but we didn't make a fight. At the time we made the Khalil Roundtree fight, Ankalaev already had a fight.
Right. So, and that's what I'm asking you. So Ankalaev was fighting Alexander Rakic. You made that fight maybe 2.5 weeks before you made Roundtree versus Alex. And I was surprised that you would put a number 8 guy in, not criticizing Khalil, because I feel like Daniel and Chael, that Khalil is a good fighter and it'll make a fun fight.
And we did too.
But just the is that the reason why you made the fight as opposed to Ankalaev? Just the fact that it might be a bombs away showdown?
I mean, eventually when we made the fight, that's why we made it. But I don't remember the timing of everything that happened. But Ankalaev had a fight. Listen, Ankalaev's ranked number 2. He goes out and puts on an unbelievable performance, and Alex is still the champion. Then he's next.
Right. Now, Mike Bond from MMA Junkie.
They're gonna run the. You see what I'm saying? He could literally say the same thing in this situation. If anybody's upset and they say, "What about Arman Tsarukyan?" Listen, Arman's right up there. If he goes out there and gets a great win, he's next for the title. But he already had a fight when this was done Well, yeah, but couldn't you have not made that fight and put Arman in front instead of Ilia in for Ilia instead of Paddy, because they were both like waiting for a fight? Like, why did you choose to do this? Hey, listen, I don't remember exactly how it went down. All I know is when we made the fight for Ilia, because we hadn't made one yet, Ilia wasn't training because his brother was on this card. So we made it. Arman wanted to fight. We made a fight. Now he can't fight. So Ilia's ready to go. The only guys there were Paddy and Justin Gaethje. We couldn't make it work with Gaethje. We had to go with Paddy. Boom. Now they have their explanation, that same exact response that they used to justify getting Alex Pereira, that amazing fight with Khalil Roundtree. Now, am I complaining? Not in the slightest. I think they should go this route because I do think it is justifiable for sure that you can get Paddy or Gaethje in there. I actually thought Gaethje made the most sense, but I think Paddy makes a lot of sense too. He had an incredibly dominant victory over Michael Chandler. We saw Charles Oliveira get a shot after a dominant victory over Oliveira, except for over Chandler, except for Paddy finished Chandler. So like, I can kind of see it. And again, I was one of the people in the camp from the get-go saying, I don't get why Arman should get slotted in. Dana White said from the beginning, since January, he's got to fight his way back to the title. Why does that all of a sudden change? Just because enough time had passed, it didn't make any sense. So I think this is totally fair and fine. I feel very bad for Justin Gaethje if he doesn't get this fight, because I would love to see Gaethje go in there versus Ilia. I think that'd be a really fun fight. But I think in this case, they're setting up the play so they can justify correctly that Paddy can get in there above Arman. And I think, unfortunately for Gaethje, he's going to fall by the wayside, and maybe they're going to try and offer him a different fight. But this is what I think. And I think it's because it's like they got a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You can't pass it up. You can't risk it. If Gaethje goes in there and beats Ilia, you just destroyed a super fight. And that super fight can go as one of the first cards once the Paramount deal kicks in. So that's what I think. I think the bigger announcement here is not about Arman versus Dan Hooker, which is a huge announcement and an amazing fight. Is that I think they're setting it up so that we got Ilia Topuria versus Paddy the Baddie for UFC Gold. I am so excited. I cannot wait. I'm over the moon. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.